Yeah, very good morning to all, and welcome to the session on IFRS 9 automation, which is key ingredients in IFRS 9 automation. Thank you for the continuous patronage from all the attendees that we have. As you are all aware of, Aptiva is a leading organization in risk advisory space and software solutions. We have been tracking IFRS 9 as a regulation since conceptualization and for past few years along with our customers. We decided to bring up this topic in 3 webinar series. First one was the complete challenges about IFRS 9 automation. In second webinar, we deep down into automation, deep down into risk modeling. And the third and final webinar is here today, which is on automation. This webinar would be led by my colleague, Mr. Vivek Gupta. Vivek is working with Aptiva for more than 6 years. He's in industry for more than a decade and advising various banks on the areas of risk and finance. In terms of IFRS 9, he has himself led more than 10 projects and in multiple jurisdictions. And who better than Vivek can tell more about automation because he has conceptualized a solution and enhanced it over a period of time, looking at the challenges. So that's about Vivek, and in terms of the set of webinar is this, the time duration is 1 hour, roughly around 45 to 50 minutes. There would be a continuous message on IFRS 9. Last 10 minutes we will keep for question and answers. The Q&A session is open out here. You can post your questions or you can hold on or you can send it on chat window as well. With this, let me once again welcome all the attendees and the panelists. And over to you, Vivek.
Thank you, Kedar. Good morning, everyone. So what we will be discussing today, essentially 3 core components. One is what are the various moving parts of the entire IFRS 9 platform. So as a bank or as an FI, what you should be looking at, the different requirements. Secondly, we'll discuss in detail what are the various expectations of the multiple stakeholders which are involved in the entire IFRS 9 journey. So that is the second area. And the third area is what should be a right strategy when you go for an automation or when you're thinking of an automation, how you should go about it. So moving on, essentially just a disclaimer at the start, the webinar is not for somebody who's looking more to understand in detail about the IFRS 9 concepts or about the IFRS 9 methodologies. The entire next 45 minutes of my session, I'll be focusing more on how and what are the challenges being witnessed and faced by a number of banks across the globe, and what kind of the mistakes a bank should not commit at the time of identifying the right partner for the entire automation of the IFRS 9 requirements. So let us first deep dive to understand what are the various IFRS 9 requirements in terms of a solution. So what you see on the screen, these various 7 boxes which are identified in blue shade, these are nothing but the various stages or the various components of an IFRS 9 solution engine. So the journey starts from identification of the classification and measurement, which is nothing but your accounting requirements, where you basically try to classify all your exposures, all your accounts into 3 categories of amortized cost, FVOCI, and FVPL categories. And eventually only those assets which are categorized under the amortized cost or the FVOCI categories, which is pertaining to the debt securities, on which you have to essentially compute your expected credit losses or ECL. Now, essentially that information flows to the first aspect, which helps in identifying the various stages of an IFRS 9. So an exposure can be classified into stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 as per the requirement for IFRS 9. So that is being done as a part of your stage assessment framework, or what we call as the credit deterioration framework. Now with that, obviously there can be, the system should have the capability to provide the manual overrides, should have the capability to do the overriding at both customer level, at an account level, at a deal level. So that's the second part. Then the third thing is this is being fed out to the ECL engine. Now once the IFRS 9 platform has categorized the entire exposures into right categories of stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, then you need to essentially calculate what is your exposure at default. So essentially, like for the corporate portfolio and for the retail portfolio, there could be multiple approaches. On the retail portfolio, typically banks try to do the prepayment behavioral modeling, or identify, the various pools, various subsegments of the customer, and break them out into different pools, and then estimate what is the likely exposure at default that a bank can have on a customer A in the next 12 months, or in the next 24 months, or 36 months. So there is a complete EAD system out here. Now on the corporate side, similarly, you would be looking at on the cash flows treatment. So the platform should also have the capability, if a bank does not have an ALM system in place to give the forecasted future cash flows, then the IFRS 9 system should help the bank to generate those future cash flows and essentially calculate the future expected credit losses. And similarly, allow the capability to host the CCF models, the prepayment models, the behavioral models for both the corporate as well as the retail and the investment portfolio. The another interesting aspect then comes around is the probability of default. We know that for IFRS 9, we need PDs for stage 1, which is your 12-month point in time PDs, and your stage 2 and 3, the lifetime point in time PDs. Now out here, there is a big difference between Basel and the IFRS 9 requirements. Without going deep out here into the subject, want to highlight that for a bank in an IFRS 9 system, they would need both the components, that the PD should be computed within the system, as well as the PD term structure should also be computed in the system. It should not be like that these two key core components are computed somewhere outside in some toolkits or in some Excels or some, analytical languages, R or Python, and then you just feed in the final output to the IFRS 9 system and compute. The expectation of the IFRS 9 platform is that you are doing all those computation inside the platform, so that you can calculate the impact on the portfolio in the real-time basis. And then it further leads to the third core component, which is your loss given default. Again, there could be multiple approaches around it: a workout LGD approach, a chain and ladder method approach, or a Bayesian approach, or whatever it is. Depending upon the sophistication of bank A to bank B, the LGD core computation engine should also sit on the same platform. Finally, all of this is being fed into the overall ECL capital calculator, where you give the flexibility in terms of the platform, that whether it has the capability to do an account level computation, or it has the capability to do the computation at an overall pool level. So there could be a bank which might be looking to do a computation for a retail portfolio at a pool level, whereas for a corporate portfolio at an individual account level. Ultimately, all of this is being fed to your reporting engine. So finally, without a comprehensive disclosure reporting requirement getting generated from the same platform, the overall requirements are not being met for any particular bank. So this, in a brief, are the various components which a bank should look when they are evaluating or when they are looking for the right partner for an IFRS 9 automation. So the journey starts from accounting, it moves to the impairment calculation, it moves to the final reporting, and this entire gamut all together sits on the same unified platform. Now, with this thought, let us understand which are the various stakeholders which are there involved in the entire IFRS 9 journey. So the entire methodologies in most of the banks are typically owned by the CRO or the risk team. So their job is more around to identify what is the right approaches for the PD, LGD, AD assessment, what should be the right framework, what should be the intent. The CFO is more governing the disclosures, is more governing around the numbers which needs to be disclosed in the audit reports to the investors. So the expectations comes around, what can you do this kind of a scenario and tell me what it looks like on my balance sheet or on my P&L statement. So for example, the CRO is saying, I have a model for forecasting my PD for the next year based on GDP, but CFO says, okay, I don't believe completely on this. I feel that our portfolio can have a better relation with an oil prices. Can you give me an impact assessment based on that? Or I need 3 different new reports. Can you provide me that? Similarly, the CRO can ask its own team that, you have chosen, for example, regression as an approach. instead of a regression approach, can you choose a z-score approach and tell me what is the impact on the PD and what is the impact on the final ECL? Obviously, both these teams together finally work in hand with the regulatory team who is responsible for final verification of the numbers, ensuring there are no errors in the overall computation, and then disclosing it and submitting it to the regulator for the final submission. So all the three pillars of IFRS 9 in a bank A to bank B obviously will have varied roles and responsibilities, but the challenges faced by them over our experience in last 3 to 4 years since when the IFRS journey has started, we've realized we have tried to segregate in each of these business functions, and that we will take care of in the subsequent slides. So the first is let us understand the challenges faced by a CRO. When we talk to any CRO, the first question which comes is when they want to look at a system in terms of an IFRS 9, how comprehensive a system is. So for example, can I get a system which has all the possible methodologies which are acceptable by the auditors and the regulators in the market? So what I mean here, let me take a slide. So what you're looking at on the screen is the entire ECL computation chart for a corporate portfolio. So these boxes shows you the intermediate core components or the approaches which are existing for any given portfolio. So for example, let me take, like for example, to calculate a probability of default, the first step is you need to do through the cycle to point in time PD calibration. Now, in order to do so, you can have multiple approaches, right? Now, this is where the most interesting part or the journey of IFRS 9 starts with. That for any bank who is right now in the stage of IFRS 9 implementation, the first thing the CRO would be looking out here is in the system or the risk team that I would like to see if I choose an external benchmarking versus a regression approach, what is the impact I have on my portfolio? And similarly, if on the LGD side, I want to use a haircut-based LGD approach versus a decision tree approach, what is the impact I have on the LGD, and finally rolling up to the ECL level. Now, to do this, in most of the systems, they typically hardwire to configure only one of the approaches in the production. So what I mean here, when a bank is trying to implement or they're looking for some automation, even if they're doing it on an Excel, they have the only capability to configure one of these approach and do the computation. They do not have a choice that on the fly, I select binomial approach, generate the PD term structure, see the impact on the ECL. On the fly, select credit iteration as an approach, generate a PD term structure and see the impact, and then compare and see the contrast between the two approaches. This is something which, the most of the CROs have been struggling with, that how can I see all the possible approaches, the entire umbrella in my system, and then, let my team decide and play around, to select the most appropriate approach. Now, why this becomes very important, a reason for that is IFRS 9 does not mandate that a bank A or bank B has to use this particular approach. Unlike in Basel, where there is a standard guidelines, where in a jurisdiction, for example, in Vietnam, every bank in the Vietnam will have to follow the regulations which have been circulated by the Central Bank of Vietnam. But in IFRS 9, that's not the case. In IFRS 9, it's more of a principle-based approach. So bank A can use a regression approach versus bank B, depending upon their complexity in the portfolio, depending upon the materiality in the portfolio, they can choose and work on, suppose z-score as an approach. So the choice of what approach, assumptions, underlying models, these are left on the bank to decide. So this becomes a really one of the core pillars for the bank in order to evaluate. Now, the second important aspect here is the self-service. Now, as I said, it's a principle-based approach. So obviously, the assumptions which I've taken in 2019 might not hold good now in 2020. And I would like to make those changes in the system and see the impact. Now, if we expect that for every change, the business user or the risk team has to go every time to an IT, or they have to go every time back to the vendor and then make those changes in the system, then that's a gap which is there always existing between an IT and between the the business, or I say the gap between the technology and the business user. So what the CROs and the risk teams are looking at, that can I have a system where I as a team or as an individual can do whatever I want to do in the system on my own. So for example, if I show you a view like this, where you can see there is a list of certain queries, certain rules are being written, and this is just for an example, this is the stage classification rule which is written. And you can read somewhere in the middle that if it is in stage one, it has this, if it is in stage two, it is this, and so on. Now, if a business user is expected to, make changes in this, obviously it is never happening in this life. But if you provide a view like this, where it's an Excel formula, okay, and where you say, if I have to change, instead of rating grade 19, it moves to rating grade 18 for making a customer move to stage 3, or instead of days past use of greater than 30, if it is 45 and a customer moves to stage 2, obviously the user can modify that. So if a system is providing a view and the capability to manage the entire computation from the front end by the end user, then that is a win-win for the bank. And this is what a bank needs to evaluate at the time when they're deciding on picking up for the right partner in their automation strategy. And the third core aspect is, for an analytics team or for the CRO team, which is under the analytics team, which is under the CRO, is, can I have one platform on which I can do the execution, I can do the model development, I can do the what if analysis on top of model development. So let me break this out, what I mean here. So for example, most of the banks typically are hiring either an external party to develop the model, or they are in-house developing the models. And when I say models, these are your point in time probability of default models, your loss given default models, your exposure at default models. All these kind of models are, being developed on either using R or Python or some other tactical toolkits. Now, when I'm looking at the entire IFRS 9 journey, I don't want my team to go and sit on a separate infrastructure to build a model. And then it becomes a bigger challenge to configure those models in a system which is running my entire IFRS 9 computation. So can I have a system on which I can do the IFRS 9 ECL computation, I can do my accounting, and on the same platform, I can also develop those models or those approaches on my own without getting back to the vendor or something, and without getting into the process of a change requirement. So these are the three core, the overall moving wheels where the risk team and the CROs are struggling with on day-to-day basis. Now, moving on from the second aspect is, let's understand the challenges which have been put across by the CFO and the finance team. The first one is, we know that the IFRS 9 numbers will change from period 1 to period 2. So for example, let's talk about a scenario in December 2019. The banks would have calculated an ECL, for example, of 1 million. But in the March 2020, or let's talk about in June 2020, because of COVID coming into picture, because of number of people becoming unemployed, getting impacted on the salaries and the business, obviously the default rates have increased and the numbers or the recoveries have come down. So the expected credit losses would have increased. Now the first question comes, how does a CFO explain to the board, to the senior management, or to the investors itself, that why between any two different ECL numbers, there is a change? So what is happening between any two different outputs? Now, this is one of the key aspects where, every single customer whom we have met, okay, have been struggling with in terms of how do they identify that which are the components which is leading to this core, the attribution. So let me explain this. How do we explain this to ECL? So for example, you have a ECL for one of these scenarios for $50, and there is another ECL for $69.3. So there is an absolute term, an increase in the ECL by $19.3, which is leading to corresponding 40% increase in the ECL. Now the first point which comes in, what are the core components which can lead to this change? So there are three key drivers, PD, LGD, and EAD. I want to understand which is the key contributing factor. So there are two concepts which are being floated in the industry and people use them interchangeably, but they are very different. So there is a variance analysis and there is an attribution analysis. A variance analysis is talking more of that my PD from 1% has increased to 1.05%, which means a 5% increase. My LGD has increased from 50% to 55, which is 10%. And my EAD has changed from $10,000 to $12,000, which is around 20% change. Now, this change calculation is what is known as a variance analysis. And this is being explained at an overall portfolio level. But is it answering the questions which what do you say a CFO is trying to understand, which is, can I say that 20% increase in the EAD out here means EAD is a key contributing factor? Might not be the case, because a 20% increase in an absolute term in this 19.3 might be only $5, but maybe $10 is contributed by 5% change in the PD. So that level of view is not available in this variance analysis, due to which the CFO cannot answer that. And the second question which comes in, can you tell me why my EAD has changed? So if you're saying that EAD is the key contributing factor, then what are the various parameters because of which my entire EAD has changed? Now, let us understand how this can be explained in a much more detailed fashion for the end user. So for example, let's pick up this same example where there are ECL of 50 and ECL of 69.3. So the first core contributing factors are the change in the PD, LGD, and EAD. What do we mean here is nothing but that the PD, if I change just the PD and do the recomputation at an overall portfolio level. So for example, there are 10 accounts. If for those 10 accounts, I change the PD instead of 1%, I apply a 1.05% PD and do the recomputation, it will tell me the delta contribution just because of the change in PD, which becomes from 50 to 52.5. Similarly, if I just change the LGD, keep other two components consistent, it will tell me what is the delta contribution by LGD. And similarly on the EAD side, what is the delta contribution on the EAD by changing just the EAD component. Now out here, it is very clear that EAD is leading to the maximum change in my numbers. But in this, because these are the three individual parts, they also provide a union contribution to the change. So where if PD and LGD both are changing, then what is the impact on my ECL? If PD and EAD are changing, and so on. So without getting into too much of technicalities, the view which we are trying to explain here is, it is explaining that I can know in an absolute terms that attribution contributed by change in PD is $2.5, change led by LGD is $5.2, and change led by EAD is $10.8. Now this is exactly, I know now as an analyst, as a CFO, that which is the area I need to optimize, or I need to look at, or I can explain it to somebody. So now the point which I want to drive here is that the entire attribution analysis can only be done at an account level, because as you know, I have to change each of these parameters at an account level to get into the view to see whether it is 52.5 or it is 55, which I cannot do it at an overall portfolio level. So there is a difference between the variance and the attribution analysis, and the answers which the CFO or anybody else in the bank is trying to look at, that what is leading to the change in the overall ECL, that can only be established by the fact of the attribution analysis. And to do this, how it is being done, so there are like three contributing factors, which is represented by the F. So the equation out here, this 2 to the power S minus 2 is representing what are the number of computations I need to do. As I said, I need to change PD, I do the recomputation, I change LGD, I do the recomputation again, I change EAD and I do the recomputation again. So there are like 2 to the power 3, which is 8. And since path A and path B is already there with me, so that gets out. So totally there are 6 intermediate computes which I need to do. So the system which is being taken by the bank, that should really support a quick turnaround time in order to establish that the customer can see all this, kind of analysis in real time. So what I'll also do is I'll show you this with the help of one of the screens which I have developed as a part of our IFRS 9 journey, just to give a glimpse of what do I mean here. So what I'm showcasing here is a system which is our proprietary platform for IFRS 9, where I've selected two different ECL computations for two different dates for two different time periods. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to click on compare now. And our system on the fly right now is computing 6 intermediate computes, which I've just explained on the previous slide, and trying to generate the delta contribution by PD, LGD, EAD, and so on. So for example, out here, there is an ECL coming up for one of the periods is 218, for another period it's $313 million. First question, can you explain me why there is an increase in 95 million of ECL? Yes, I can. This is the first view, which we call as the analyst view, where we are explaining in an absolute terms, which is signified by $289 million, $109 million, and so on, where the PD is the core contributing factor, or the LGD. And we are explaining then a management view, which wants to understand, okay, why my PD has changed, which is the second view, which explains more in, is it because of the methodology, or is it because the portfolio shifted between two different scenarios? Is it because the volume shift, that the number of customers coming in my portfolio, repaying, or the incremental new book, and so on, or the scenario shift itself? The scenario which we have estimated before the COVID and scenario which we've estimated after the COVID scenario, is it because of that, or the maturity change in my overall portfolio? And this further, now can you also tell me, which is now the third question which comes in, okay, I've understood in the overall, this is the contribution by PD, and PD is changing because of these factors. But can you also tell me what is the change which is leading because of the customers or the accounts which is contributing to this? So you can drill down on this particular chart, and it takes you to the underlying data set, which shows what are those set of customers, which have contributed to this particular bar. So this kind of a feature a bank is looking at from the portfolio level. You identify the core components and then drill down to the most granular data, which is your account level information. So now moving back to the presentation, okay. Let us understand the other core requirements. So for example, I'm moving on to my second item, which is before the numbers have been finalized. Now, the model development team will tell you, I have a PD model, for example, which is forecasting the PD for the next 3 months or for the next 3 years using GDP as a factor and unemployment rate. And for example, you're talking here for a credit cards portfolio. Now, somebody in the bank says, CFO says, for example, that I don't agree. For me, in my experience, of our economy, the inflation rate, act as a key driving factor for the credit cards portfolio. Can you show me an impact on it? So can I configure a model which is driven by, for example, an inflation rate, and can see the impact of that factor on my overall ECL impact? So what essentially I am referring here is, if I go back onto the previous screen, let me pick up something as a quick example. Okay. So this becomes really easy for me to put across the point which, the bank is trying to look at. So for example, there are various approaches, and I'm picking one of the approach, which is a regression approach. And I'm taking one of the models which are being used by the bank. So you have a model which is nothing but driven based on oil prices, GDP, and inflation. Now I want to add another factor to this equation, for example, which is the unemployment rate. So can I do this from the front end? So I configured a new model. For example, this is the new model I'm trying to configure with certain random values. This is the new model which gets configured. This is the new factor which gets added. I submit this, and I'm creating, suppose, champion model. Okay. Now in this champion model, I'm saying, okay, I have created a new model. This is what is being advised by the bank, by the CFO. And I went back to my system in order to see that, can I do the ECL impact assessment on top of this? So the power which the CFO or which the users are trying to look at, if they're sitting in a presentation, they're presenting it to somebody, somebody says okay, can you use the other model, which you're saying is your second best model? Now, how you do that? Typically in the system, what happens is it typically goes to a change request and users go back to the IT. IT will say, okay, I'll configure this new formula. And then it comes to the hands of the business user and then they are able to do it. So which means a cycle of like 4 to 5 weeks, which is not acceptable by any senior management when they're looking at. Now out here, this is the model we have just configured, right, Champion? If I am able to select this and start a new competition on top of it, then this is the kind of the power which essentially is needed for an IFRS 9 journey. Reason for it, because there are multiple approaches, there can be multiple models, and there can be multiple what do you say, the assumptions which can be suggested by multiple stakeholders in the bank. So now what essentially the one of the challenges is that the system should be flexible enough in order to cater the requirements of the senior management or the investors in the real-time basis. The third core important is sorry, so Hoang has raised a point. Okay. Yes, please. Can you go ahead? Okay, but Hoang, can you, I think you can raise a hand. I'm just trying to look at. Can you please post your queries on the Q&A section and I'll take it towards the end. Okay, so moving on, what I was referring to, now the third aspect is, if doing all these changes, for a bank, if really the system takes a hell lot of a time, then it really doesn't help the end objective. So for example, we met one of the CFOs and they were saying that his current system is taking 36 hours to do the Basel capital computation, for example. So when he's looking for an IFRS 9 engine, which has a similar data set, he's saying, I don't want a system which takes this much amount of time. Can I have a system which takes 1/10 of a time, which means people want to see the results, the output in near real time. So the technology on which the entire system is sitting on for IFRS 9 journey should support the business need. This is not a system where people just click on compute and they come after 2 days and then they see the result. If that is a kind of a system, then essentially we are not able to meet the kind of the requirements. So a view of this attribution analysis, this can only be explained with those 6 intermediate computes. If the computations are really faster, if the computations are taking a hell lot of a time, then essentially the end objective of the users will never be met. So the technology should support the business requirement. The fourth point which is out here is, obviously as a senior management, my report requirements will keep on changing. Also, as I said, IFRS 9 is still an evolving regulation. It's still not a very finalized, detailed out regulation. So every year we are witnessing the regulators are coming with new and new changes and enhancements. And so it comes on the regulatory requirements also on the reports. So if a reporting mechanism on a platform is completely, hard coded and it's completely rigid, which does not allow you to make any changes on your own as a bank, then again, every year you can imagine you are shelling out thousands of dollars, paying to some IT vendor for incorporating all those changes in the report, which is what the CFO's first point comes in. I don't have that much amount of budgets to be shelled out every year on these reporting requirements. The fifth point is, which is the most important, the crucial in this entire journey, that I am looking for automation today and not tomorrow. Most of these strategic systems, when they come for the implementation, people see their implementation goes on for years and years. And the primary reason for it is twofold. One, either the enterprise grade solution vendor, he is not doing on his own, and there is a third party involved in doing the implementation. So the solution is developed by somebody else and the implementation is done by somebody else. So there is a big gap between these two stakeholders itself. And now they are talking to the customer. So now there are three pieces which have different understanding. Or the other reason is the systems are sitting on legacy technology stacks, which are so rigid that any change which you ask, they have to go and make changes at the foundation level, which means they'll, for example, if in a report you miss one column to bring it into your system and you have to add a new column, and the vendors will say, okay, I'll have to go and make changes in my physical data model, which means it's some effort for me for 2 months or like a month, and then it will go to UAT, and the UAT will sign out, then it will go to production. So essentially what happens, even for a small change, it derails the entire project. So what the first point comes in, okay, I am looking for an automation and I want to have a strategic system in place, but I'm not looking it for tomorrow. I want to solve that problem in a span of like 8 to 10 weeks at the max. So can I do that? And the most important aspect is, the regulation, the spends on the regulation over the years have increased tremendously. Reason for that is because of so many changes which are happening at an overall global level. And since the 2008 global financial crisis, the regulators have become more stringent on the regulatory requirements on the norms. So now what happens, we talk about Basel III. Now, last year, there has been a new regulation which has come up, which is commonly known as in the overall industry as Basel IV, which the banks have to comply by 2022. Now, the data set between Basel and between IFRS 9 is 90% the same. Similarly, we talk about ICAP. In ICAP, we do stress testing and as well as the Pillar 2 requirements. Your Pillar 2 requirements are also the same. So like 80% data points used for computation in ICAP and stress testing is again what is being used in IFRS 9. And similarly, the last point, like your ALM system, your balance sheet analytics, which you do, again, the underlying data set, the profitability modules, the data set on the credit risk side remain again 80% the same. So when, as a CFO, I'm trying to solve my IFRS 9 problem, at the same point in time, I know these are the other regulations which comes in. Do I need to reinvest and reinvent the same wheel again and again every time? So an investment of $1 million essentially becomes a $5 million in the next 4 years because I'm trying to solve a similar problem. So what we say, like in a family, there are 4 people, everybody wants to reach to the same destination. If they have to use 4 different cars, then essentially it's a waste of money, waste of fuel, and it's very detrimental for the environment itself. It's the same thing. The cost of owning multiple applications, solving a similar problem is a bigger problem for a bank rather than having a same platform on which you can have multiple applications. So the idea here is the partner which a bank is looking at, it should be futuristic in nature. It should not only solve your IFRS 9, but it should have the capability to manage the other requirements of your regulatory needs. Now, moving on from here, let's go to the requirements of a regulatory reporting team. Now, how this becomes very important given that so many errors which can happen at so many stages in the entire IFRS 9 journey. And as you can, if you remember in my first slide, opening slide, I've talked about there are like 8 different components to it. Okay. I can make a mistake in stage assessment, in PD computation, in LGD computation. Now, how do I, view where I can see this is the output, this is the underlying computation being running on top of this output, and this is the underlying data on which everything is sitting. Can I have a view of that? So for example, which I want to show here, like if I can show you that quickly. So what, if the system has the capability to give essentially in a complete autonomous manner, output where I can drill down and show what are the business formula, what are the business rules which are running in, and what are the various joints which I'm performing on the underlying data set, then that's something which is the need of the hour. Okay, sorry, there is, I don't know, somehow a magnifying glass got started. Okay, the view which you're looking at on the screen right now is nothing but explaining you how different steps for any computation. Like for example, for EAD computation, what are the various steps? On each step, what data set I'm using, I can go to that level. So this big chart, what you look at is a self-documentation capability for the end user, where I can go drill down to the underlying data set and can see what is running on the system. So nothing should be a black box. Everything should be completely transparent for the end user, whether it's the risk team or it's the regulatory reporting team. A lot of times it happens, the person who is involved in the implementation, and suppose in the bank side, he leaves the bank and he joins some other organization. That information that how the system is working always goes away with that particular individual. The biggest win for a bank is, can I delineate that knowledge? Can I keep that knowledge within the system itself? Which is the answer to that could be yes. If the systems are able to provide the capability that what is the data attributes, what are the various formulas which I'm using, how those data attributes are running. If I can provide a view on top of this, then essentially for any given compute, we don't have to go back to IT. The answer for all of this can be identified by the reporting team by accessing it on the system. Similarly, the approval workflows. For example, the stage assessment. It's one of the most commonly used example where, as per the rules, I say, suppose a customer is moving because he is in 35 DPD, he moves to stage 2. But I, as a business owner, I know that this customer went into 35 DPD because he was on a vacation, he was not in the country, he was traveling somewhere, so due to which he has missed on his EMI. Now, can I classify this as a risky customer? No. So I would like to override this and put him up from stage 2 to stage 1 for my ECL computation. But if there is a maker checker around it, there is a workflows around it. So that is the kind of a requirement which the regulatory teams are looking at. And third is the interconnectedness of the data. So this is very important. So I am using, for example, macroeconomics, and I'm using GDP as a factor. Now GDP is impacting which all computation. So GDP can impact my LGD computation, EAD computation, my PD computation. Similarly, I have a customer rating. Now that customer rating is impacting only the PD, or it is having an impact on my EAD computation also. So how do I view all the data set which is talking to each other in a holistic manner? And then if their data quality challenges are there, then I can understand if rating is missing, then obviously that impact will come on both the PD and the LGD. So this is a view I would like to see in the system where I can understand if the data is missing, what is the impact it has on my computation and the overall portfolio. Now, essentially summarizing the every point, I would like to take ahead. The last point is, what is the right strategy? So the IFRS 9 journey, by looking at all the challenges and in our experience, a bank should aim for a strategic solution partner. So there could be banks which are in the stage right now where they're doing some computation on an Excel. Obviously, I need not talk about the disadvantages or the capabilities which Excel doesn't provide. You cannot do drill downs, you cannot have end-to-end automation, you cannot identify where the mistakes are happening. It's completely manual, it's completely prone to errors. You cannot develop models, you cannot do any what-if analysis and so on. So there is a plethora of the requirements which is not being met by an Excel toolkit. But banks have decided that in their maturity model, they want to start small by small. So they have started in Excel, and now they are moving forward from Excel to a strategic solution. There are few banks which have contemplated or which have thought about doing a tactical toolkit. A tactical toolkit could be like some of the consulting partners in the industry are selling toolkits which are being developed on R and Python. Obviously, those are tactical and very specific for the use case you're trying to solve. Those toolkits are only able to solve which is your ECL, which is PD into LGD into AD. But every other requirement around your ECL computation, which we talked about, the comprehensiveness, the accounting requirements, the drill down capabilities, the attribution analysis, the model what if, these are not achievable in the tactical toolkits. And secondly, these are not stable. So if you want to do any changes, it's a nightmare for a tactical toolkit. So to make those changes, to manage these toolkits, it becomes a biggest nightmare. So essentially, you might invest and spend only, for example, X amount of dollars today, but which is like you'll find maybe 40% cheaper to a strategic solution. But essentially, the amount of human power, the human resources, the bandwidth, the time which you invest might be much more than actually what you would have spent at the day one when you were selecting the right strategic partner. And also at that point in time, the requirements which you were looking at were, half filled. So ultimately, in our view, in our experience, the IFRS 9 kind of a requirement, the answer for all the needs, all the challenges which are being faced has to be managed by a strategic solution. And this basically is ensuring it's not answering your requirements of today, but even the requirements which are supposed to come in the next 4 years, which we can foresee from our experience, and we are trying to help it out. Now, there are few banks which have also gone ahead with the strategic solution, but the optimization and the automation which they were looking at led to a suboptimal automation. So the point which we want to establish here, when you're looking even for a strategic partner, ensure that you are not just covering these three parts, which is your ECL or integration with the core banking or with the rigid reporting requirements. Should also look at the comprehensiveness, the model, the what if capabilities, the computation power which is needed in order to support the features in the area of attribution analysis and so on, and how much the platform brings in the knowledge on the domain, which you don't have to really struggle with on day-to-day basis. So with this, I would like to summarize the overall key requirements which are needed in the entire IFRS 9 strategy selection. One, the platform or the strategic solution should have a flexible data management, which means if you're saying, I need industry today in my underlying data, and 3 months down the line, you say, I need region also in my underlying data because one of the reports I want to make at a region level. The platform should allow you to make those changes at a data level from the front end by yourself without having an involvement of an IT team or a vendor. So don't have to shell out anything additional. The second is it should have an elastic infrastructure. So right now, regulators are not very, like in all the jurisdictions have allowed for the adoption of cloud. But as we are moving ahead, most of the jurisdictions, the regulators are allowing the use of the cloud. We know for a system like IFRS 9, which is used maybe 5 times a month, why should I invest in a big hardware? Now, today I'm sitting in a board presentation. I can just ramp up my computation power. If it is on a cloud, I can have 10 servers for 2 hours and I might pay very less versus a fixed server cost of 5 servers, which I don't even need for the entire month. And it sits idle. So the solution should be futuristic in terms of where you can increase the computation power, you can increase the infrastructure requirements depending upon your need for a couple of days, and you can ramp it down easily when it is not needed. So this is the future state of the art which the solution should capture. The third point is the overall interactiveness. I want to do this, I want to do that. I'm able to do all of that from the front end without having any dependency on anybody from the IT side. So basically bridging the gap between the functional and the technology. Fourth point, the comprehensiveness. This is really important. The solution should cater your accounting, your ECL, your reporting, your technology requirements in a holistic manner. It should not be like that. Okay, Vivek, compute the PD outside. I'll just take the PD term structure inside and I'll do PD into LGD into AD. If this is what the solution is doing, this is not an IFRS 9 solution. It's not a strategic solution. It is more of an Excel tool. It's more of a tactical tool. So the solution should allow you the complete capabilities, the complete requirements, which is in the area of IFRS 9. The transparency I've already talked about in the previous slide. The attribution analysis, which we have talked about. It's one of the key areas. If that is not there, you would be struggling to identify the reason why your ECL is changing. And eventually, over the period, you will realize more than the automation, the answer to identifying the core contributing factors which is leading to the change is a mammoth problem to solve. And lastly, the self-service automation. So with this, I would like to end my session. I would like to open it for a Q&A and would be happy to take whatever the questions you have. Huang, I think you have previously raised your hand. If you have a question, can you, would you like to raise it now? Okay, I can't see Mr. Huang being available. Okay, so I have one, in the chat window, I have one question which comes up that the banks who have right now not started on the, the implementation of any solution and who are still contemplating on the, how they should go about it and which should be the right partner, how they can easily look in terms of what are the things. So the one thing is, as I said out here, there could be multiple things. Your Excel can only take care of your, small requirements where you have already decided upon that you have one model, you have one approach, and you have one, what you say, overall portfolio. You can do that computation at overall portfolio level. The ECL level computation will be a bit of a challenge. Okay, so Nick, let me just take this question and I'll come back to your point. So yeah, so essentially, what I was talking about is, yes, the Excel will never meet your requirement, or the tactical never will meet your requirement in terms of the detail, the account level computation which you're looking at. So for example, let me give you one example what we mean here. So in a portfolio, for example, there is a credit card pool. In a credit card pool, there are customers which might be 4 months in maturity, and there are customers which have 1 year of maturity and 9 months of maturity. If I do a pool level computation, all these customers, if they are in stage 1, if there's a stage 1 pool, I would be applying a 12-month PD. Whereas if I'm doing an account level computation, I would be able to apply actually a 3-month PD to a customer which has a remaining maturity of 3 months and not of 12 months. So for this level of computation at this level of granularity, achieving it in an Excel is a much of a challenge, and you cannot deal with this. Okay. The other point here is the entire attribution analysis, that what are the key components which is leading to the change. For a population, if I have like 100,000 accounts in my portfolio, I cannot run it those in an Excel. I have an Excel or in the tactical toolkit. They're not meant to run on, a good amount of data set. They are good if you're doing a computation at an overall portfolio level and just doing a variance analysis, but they're not there to solve the problem at an account level on the massive data in the real time basis. That's the second point. And the third aspect here is the approaches. For example, a regression approach versus a matrix multiplication approach, where you're building transition matrices to forecast how your PD is going to look like in the future. This all, doing it in an Excel or a tactical toolkit is not feasible, because they will come configured with only approach which you are doing right now. But there are 6 different approaches to solve the same problem. You will never have those approaches available on these toolkits on their own. So that is the second biggest challenge which you will face. Okay. So yeah, this is the point basically I would like to submit on that aspect. Nick, I think this point on the total implementation cost, will take this offline. Thank you for this point. If there is anything else, if any other question, anybody from the audience who have, or Kedar, if you want to have something, we can discuss that.
I think you wonderfully explained, Vivek. Thank you so much for this session, where you have detailed out all the points, and I see the multiple interactions which I have with customers. These are the questions which come, And especially the most important thing is that the senior management and the regulators perspective which you have brought in, which would help the on-job customers or on-job executives to convince the management. Right? So that is really good. If we have, I think 2-3 minutes more, can we, if you can tell us a little more about model development and aspect attached to this overall solution, and what kind of, say, optimization using that platform, or how we can reduce the regular effort which is on model development team for year on year down the line, right? So these couple of points, if you can highlight in next 2 to 3 minutes, we would be good to continue.
Perfect. Okay. So essentially, Kedar, in our experience, the biggest challenge which comes out to the analytics team is, or to the model development team, is that they are trying to develop a model, and that is sitting on some other different infrastructure. And then once they develop a model, the biggest challenge which is being foreseen is, how do they bring that particular model in your IFRS 9 engine? So that model which is being developed, it could be a logistic regression model, it could be a linear regression model, how that model can come and sit and then run and execute on top of the account level data. But if there is a system on which you can develop the model then and there, and which can automatically talk to the underlying data on which the competition is supposed to run, then that is the area, which essentially brings in the efficiency or the optimization on the overall journey. So a lot of banks really struggle that they build the model outside, but it is very unfortunate that they are not able to bring it in the optimum time into the system and see the impact on the portfolio. So what they do, they end up using some Excel tools, doing those computation manually somewhere outside, but running those models on top of at a portfolio level and not at an account level, which means that kind of the answer which, or basically the investment which the bank has done, they're not able to achieve. So my suggestion would be that the bank should look out that the model development as well as the model execution is happening on the same platform, so that the challenges which are foreseen when you're bringing in the new models and approaches onto a different technology or something, those are not there at all. And this happens seamlessly in real time. Okay. So I think, Kedar, if there is nothing more, we can conclude the session.
I think we have.
Okay, I can see one question from Monica. Yeah. So Monica, in terms of the question, which is in terms of how much terms of regulatory as well as economic capital can a bank using IFRS 9 solution. So to be honest, this is, we cannot really say that a bank can really save capital by using any of the solution, whether it's an Aptiv or it's any other vendor solution which is available in the market for IFRS 9. I think this needs a different discussion. Monica, maybe we can get in touch with you in order to explain you offline in more detail how exactly the economic capital regulatory and the IFRS 3 capital computations or the provisioning computation are being done independently, and how the IFRS 9 platform which is being developed by us is supporting that. But stating this, that can you save it or not, I won't be able to really comment on that right away. So there are multiple facets to it before I can really answer on that.
Yeah, thank you, Vivek, and thank you all the attendees who have joined this session from Vietnam, Philippines, Cambodia, India, and Saudi Arabia, and few other geographies. Thank you very much for making this webinar series successful. Thank you for your patronage all along. As the fact of the matter, we will keep coming up with newer subjects, and which are required, and which you also recommend. Our customers also keep recommending us offline. So stay tuned. Subscribe to our channels, YouTube channel, so you will get more and more videos out there. And thank you, and bye.
Thank you all. Thank you.